welcome back to the Calm and Connected podcast. I'm your host, Janine Halloran, and today I got a chance to interview somebody who is near and dear to my heart. His name is Jon Cunhas, and we worked together several years ago in an elementary school. And I wanted to be able to interview him because he has got a fascinating story. So let me tell you a little bit about Jon. He's a licensed mental health counselor with over a decade of experience in the field. He's the co-founder of Riser and Tread, a company dedicated to supporting others through a combination of therapy and coaching. Jon also works as a chief performance coach for Cherish Health. Jon's main purpose is to enhance employee well-being and performance from both an individual and an organizational level. He is enthusiastic to support those working at the top of their field. And he also recently co-authored The Coaching Zone, and we talk about that in the podcast. And he also has his own podcast called The Grim Drive, which focuses on mental health through the lens of professional athletics. Before becoming a therapist, Jon was actually an All-American in track and field, and injury actually ended his career. So we ended up talking a little bit about that, especially in light of everything that's gone on with Simone Biles and her decisions at the Olympics. And we talk about mental health and athletics. I thought he was the perfect person to talk with about that because he has such a great background in that. So we end up talking about a little bit about Michael Phelps, about Kevin Love, and the impact that it has where these athletes are talking about mental health, the impact that it can have on just the kids in general and men, especially when it comes to thinking about Michael Phelps and Kevin Love in particular. So I hope that you enjoy this podcast. Thank you so much. Well, I'm so excited to be here today with Jon Cunhas. So Jon and I know each other from a very long time ago. We worked together and we worked in a school with 4th and 5th graders. And it was lovely to be able to get to work with you when we worked together, which I absolutely loved. It was really fun. And I have very fond memories of that year. So I know you really well, but the people who are listening to this podcast don't know you as much. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So I'm really excited to be here. And I know because you're going to be modest, you were part of the reason of like continuing to want to continue to do the work. So I'm really appreciative to be able to just talk to you. And we've been able to stay in contact. So that's been great. My story, I would say that I've always sort of known I've wanted to be like a helper. I've always sort of found myself in positions like that. I was a peer leader in high school, helping like 8th graders transition to high school. I've always been sort of like a camp counselor, teaching kids, being around people. I've always sort of wanted to be that. And then funny enough, when I went to undergrad, I was a runner. I was a track and field athlete, and that was like my purpose. That's all I wanted to do. That was what my life was going to be. And then I got injured my junior year, and then that was like gone, sort of like in an instant. And then had to decide like, okay, well, I'm not like an athlete really anymore. And what do I need to do? Graduated telling myself I'm never going to be a therapist, even though I was a psychology major. I was like, definitely not going to be someone talking to people on couches. That's not happening. So funny, that's where I'm here now. It actually took me working at an insurance company selling life and health insurance for 9 months to realize that's not how I wanted to spend the rest of my life. Talking to 200, 300 people a day who had no interest in talking to me. And then that's what kind of prompted me to go back into school and kind of refocus of like, where have I always found myself? What have I always enjoyed doing? And listening to people and helping people had always been something that was consistent. And I finally was just like, there's something here, and I want to really devote my time and attention to doing that. And that's where it all kind of started. Then I went to Lesley, got my degree, and then I've been sort of bouncing around schools, and then started doing the private practice piece a couple of years ago, and really, really enjoying it.
Yeah. It's so funny. Like, you work in other places. Like I had a couple of office jobs, and then I was like, yeah, this is not the life I want to this is not it.
Yeah.
And then something that just sort of pulls you back into it, especially if like you wanting to be a helper. There's something that like it just doesn't fill you when you're just calling people on the phone and you're like, okay, so never mind then. Um, so it's neat that you actually went through that same sort of similar story as like, I had a couple of those sort of like office jobs where I was like, yep, just confirming, not this, not it.
Yeah, this isn't me. This is not my calling. Yeah.
So interesting about your story and looking at the Olympics, especially because, so full disclosure, I'm kind of like continually watching the Olympics, like I'm keeping track of our medal count. I'm doing all this sorts of stuff. Like, and I was on vacation last week and my in-laws and I were watching the Olympics basically every night, or like honestly, even during the day when we'd go over before the beach, after the beach, we'd be watching the Olympics. And Simone Biles bowed out last week when we were down on the Cape, and it was really interesting to watch everybody's reaction. And the first thing I thought of was, gosh, I wish I could talk to Jon about this. And look at this. Now I'm able to actually talk with you about it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I have a lot. And actually, I was just on my business partner, Jotham, and I were actually just on NPR with Tiziana Darling yesterday, talking literally about Simone Biles. So that's a little plug for myself there. But I think it's, first of all, she's entitled to make decisions about what she feels prepared to do or not to do. So, the suck it up mentality, or it's just anxiety, push through it. I'm sort of tired of hearing that, because I'm on the front lines of working with people who are dealing with those types of things. And we are not in positions to dictate how people behave or what they feel comfortable doing. If she is seeing different things in her mind of what she's actually doing in real time, that's incredibly dangerous given the skills that she's out there performing. She's doing backflips on a bar like the width of your cell phone. And if she's seeing herself do something different in her head, the twisties is what they refer to them as, she could get really, really hurt. And it's, first of all, she's doing things that nobody else are even capable of doing, and putting herself into positions that no one else can do. And if she doesn't have the confidence and the wherewithal to be able to perform that stuff, she's putting herself at risk. And I think she's the best to know what she's capable of doing. So that's sort of my general stance on that, of she's in control. I think she's gotten a lot of unfair judgment. I definitely think the fact that she's a female, I definitely think the fact that she's a Black female plays a part in this, of just unfair judgment. And what would be seen as, oh, that's such a smart decision of taking care of, if we were talking about a male counterpart, the dialogue and the narrative would be very different. And I'm just kind of sick of it, to be honest. It's not fair, really. And I know, for example, Novak Djokovic, who the tennis player, was just talking about it, of like, if you can't handle the pressure, don't be an athlete. And I was really disappointed by that, given the fact that he talks a lot about mental fitness and preparation, as does Simone. And if that's a place that she's not feeling that she can do that needs to be trusted. It also raises really good importance of, one of the things that I specialize in my practice is working with athletes and doing what I call prehab work for mental fitness and preparing the mind and the brain. It is a muscle, and athletes spend enormous amount of time preparing their bodies to do the physical feats, and they spend almost no time preparing the mind until something goes wrong. And then it's like, oh, well, something's wrong now, do something. And I see the narrative is starting to shift, and I'm happy that during the Olympics, mental health has taken a center stage to draw the importance of, well, this isn't something that we should be waiting to happen for people. We should be doing the preparation and the training before it becomes an issue, so they feel prepared when adversity comes up. And I highly respect Simone for what she's doing, at keeping herself at center stage to use her platform to talk about some really serious issues, not just mental health, but sexual abuse as well. She's even gone on and talked about that. Highly respect her being able to just withstand the pressure and the critique and the criticism that she's having to go through. It's pretty inspiring.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible that she actually was able to make that decision and decide in that moment, even surrounded by all of these things. And I mean, all the Simone Biles stuff that was leading up to the Olympics, like everything, it was all about her. It was
Yep.
really, the Olympics were about her. And that is truthfully a lot of pressure. And especially with this age of social media, of like all of that, it was constant. It was constant. And then to know
Mhm.
that you are physically not feeling at 100%, and that's really scary. Like, do you push through and
Yeah.
injure yourself and then you're out forever and you're
Hmm.
done, or like you're like physically injured for the rest of your life, or do you make a different decision? It's hard because people do have a lot of big feelings about it, and I'm like, would but she's like a person though. Like,
I agree. And if she showed up with a broken leg, people wouldn't be like, get on the balance beam, right? They wouldn't be saying that. The critique would be totally different. And this is one of my points of like mental health and physical health is just health, and it's all combined and all part of it. And if one is not feeling 100% in the other, then you're not really ready to prepare. And I think one point that you bring up that's really vital and speaks to the just larger conversation, like social media, for all of the the feedback or the critique I hear from older generations about like, well, athletes have always had to deal with pressure, and it's the Olympics, and it's important, and it's always they don't quite understand the level of pressure. Athletes before social media didn't have to pay attention to public opinion or any of those different things. They didn't have it. No one had access. Simone Biles, literally any single person in the world with social media can reach out to her, right? That's not something that athletes have had to withstand. And she's been constantly surrounded by it. And it's impossible at this point to not be affected by that dialogue or that public opinion or all those different things. You can try to remove yourself from it, you can try to distance yourself from it, but ultimately it definitely plays a part. And that's a new stressor that athletes these days have to manage that wasn't present 10 years ago.
yeah, and it's pretty, it's like it's so intense, and I don't think people realize how intense it can be, in terms of like, I know I get like overwhelmed with my tiny little social media with like too many people like asking me stuff, and like I can only, and it's usually positive, but it's still like a little overwhelming because people do reach out and do and I want to make sure that I'm answering people, and then there's this pressure of like, oh, I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing, doing the responding in the right way, thinking carefully about how I'm going to respond to this. I want to make sure I'm helping people. And the idea of it being like so negative, like if I was getting inundated with negative messages constantly, how would that feel? That would feel horrible. And if I think if people
Awful.
sat and thought about it, like, how horrible is it to get all those messages constantly? So
Right.
it's an interesting phenomenon that we haven't had to deal with before. Just like, growing up and being a middle schooler and high schooler and dealing with like Snapchat. Like, that sounds horrible to me. I'll be honest. Like,
Awful.
middle
Awful.
school with
Yeah.
Snapchat, that's like my nightmare.
No, no, thank you. I'm glad I missed that whole phase.
Right. Because you could like walk
Yeah.
away. You could get home and like home was safe. And home you didn't have to deal
Yeah.
with that nonsense, right? But then you get back
Yep.
and but here it's like like right now it just follows kids around, which I think is a problem for them.
I agree.
Um, so I love the idea of like talking about mental health, and I love that Simone is in the spotlight and really highlighting it. But there's been some other athletes, especially male athletes, that I've been sort of seeing come out as well talking about it, which I find really interesting. I see some male clients of mine, and they're younger, and they really look up to sport heroes. Like, they look up to people like Michael Phelps, and they look up to Kevin Love, and they're out there
Hmm.
talking about their anxiety. So what do you think about them, different male athletes coming out and talking about mental health and the impact that it can have on our young men?
It's about time, and I'm really excited about it because I think the stigma around mental health is large enough, and the stigma around male mental health is even bigger. And a lot of men have been suffering in silence for a long time. 75% of suicides are male, right? So the numbers are really staggering towards male mental health and the struggles that we have to manage. For the narrative for most young men is, suck it up, boys don't cry. Feelings are weakness, tough it out, all those different things. And to a certain extent, sports is a sort of like the pinnacle of that, right? Like, don't show your opponent any weakness. So don't be emotional. Don't show any type of emotion. And for these athletes to kind of break that narrative, and Kevin Love speaks a lot about it, and he talks about sort of like the male playbook, and his sort of, he sees his role as rewriting the playbook, and talks about the power of vulnerability and how he feels like he's a better player in person because he now has access to all of those different things. And if we're thinking about gaining control of ourselves and our lives and our decisions, you have to be able to incorporate and understand your emotions. Our emotions are, when they're really powerful, are terrible decision makers for the most part. But if you don't know how to manage those things, you're leaving yourself in danger, really. And in sports, it's highly competitive, and a lot of emotions can be drawn up in those situations. And if you're not prepared to be able to manage that, you're in real trouble. And I would say that I have, within the last 2 or 3 years, have seen and started to see a shift, and I'm seeing a lot more young men coming and saying, I need help. Which is really, really great to see, because that wasn't the case. A lot of it was, parents, mostly moms. I'm worried about my son. I'm worried about what's going on for him. I don't feel he's ready for college is a big transition, or out of college is a big transition. And I'm starting to see same amount of moms who are nervous about their sons, but I'm also seeing more men reaching out and saying, hey, can I come and talk to you about this stuff? I think one of the things that we offer at our firm is a sports performance and recovery program. And I think the way that we like frame the work that we do with young guys, calling it coaching and talking about it through the lens of sports, I think helps them to relate. And it's not so challenging as like, I'm going to talk to a therapist. I think that term and that idea is still really stigmatizing. But if it's, I'm going to go talk to a prehab mental fitness therapist or a mental fitness coach, is a little bit different. And the skills that we're talking about in that program and what we're preparing for, yes, will help with performance, but it's not just sports performance, it's performance in general. How do you manage your day? How do you set up healthy habits? How do you identify healthy relationships? How do you remove unhealthy relationships? You can talk about it through the lens of sports. And when you have figureheads like Michael Phelps and Kevin Love and LeBron James and all of the, like, Tom Brady, Brad Marchand, I can go on and on and on about people who have been outspoken about it. It makes the conversation much easier when you're trying to add buy-in for these young guys, to say, well, if it's good enough for Tom Brady, what am I missing about why it's not good enough for you, right? Or if it's good enough for the best athletes of all, they are all doing this. Every single athlete at the top of their game are working on these skills. Why are you different? And that has really helped sort of deconstruct that barrier, that stigma, to helping them be more available to coming and trying it out.
Yeah. And I think it's so wonderful that, you have videos of them talking about it. You have articles of them talking about it. And so you can reach, especially like younger kids who are like maybe a little bit more hesitant to talk about it. Like I've introduced the topic of anxiety using Michael Phelps as an example. And to be able to really talk with them about, like, he's got it and he's talking about it. It's okay if you tell me about it. It's okay if we have this conversation. It's really about framing it as a way of helping them understand they are not alone. And there's some really amazing people out there who are also struggling. It's not bad that you're struggling with it. It's just something we have to help you work on and support you. And so that's why we're here, to help you. And I don't know, have you seen the movie Angst yet?
I haven't. No.
Documentary. So Michael Phelps is in it, and it is like, every time I almost cry when I watch it, because he talks to this little boy who is a swimmer who struggles with his anxiety, and then Michael Phelps sort of surprises him. Like, he comes in and he surprises him, and it is the cutest thing ever. He, like, his eyes get so big and they go swimming in his backyard together. It's so cute.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to watch that one.
No, absolutely. And they are now, Angst is doing this for therapists. Like, you can get viewing, you can do like a viewing sort of party. So instead of having to like view it for an entire group, you can actually view it with your individual clients. So I've started doing that.
Great.
It is.
That's awesome.
I was working with them so hard to be like, please, please, please. I really want to show it to I have these like little, I really want to show this like Michael Phelps clip to. And they were like, okay. So I was really excited to be able to share that and like let people know like you can get it now, and you don't have to do it in a whole big arena. You can get a set of views to do it with your clients, which I think is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, it's the power of when people who are dealing with these types of things speak up and they have a platform to reach millions of people. It just helps others come up. And it's not a coincidence that when they start speaking up, other people are like, oh yeah, that's me too. And for a lot of guys, they don't even really know they're struggling with anxiety. They don't know. They're just sort of adopt like, oh, this is just normal, right? This is just what it's like. And then they hear people's experience and like, huh, that's me too. And oh, this is how they got help to feel a little bit better. And we're seeing the cascade of effects, and it's great.
Right. It's even like in older men who are like, oh, I'm not having a heart attack, I'm having a panic attack. Like to understand and different, which is tricky, or to like recognize like this, I'm getting headaches, I'm getting stomach aches. It's always before this really big thing that I have to do for work, or, recognizing like making those connections even for adults is like huge. It's so neat to see when athletes are out there and men are like looking and reading and being like, okay, so I don't feel less of anything when I'm reading this, when I'm seeing this, when I'm hearing this from other people, from other men. Right. I think it's a powerful piece.
Yeah.
I love that you are working on this. I love that you frame it in terms of coaching. So the last time we talked, I think you had just launched your book. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yes. Oh man, that was a project. That was about 3 years of work, and I know I'm preaching to the choir about book production and the hassles that go into that. But it's called The Coaching Zone. It's next level leadership. I wrote it with Jon Yeager, who I've known for many years. We got connected through my old track and field coach at Wheaton. He was a sprints coach at the time. His name's Mark Mangiacotti. He's now at Harvard. And actually shout out to him. As one of the athletes from Harvard just won. Gabby Thomas just won bronze in the 200, which is really exciting. I'm really proud of him. So that's awesome. So Jon Yeager did some work for Coach Mange, is what I call him. Did some work for Coach Mange just to sort of like team development and helping coaches sort of understand the importance of what the coach's role is. And so the book really it's much more towards like manual. So it's not like you can read it cover to cover, but you can also sort of go through of like, okay, we need to work on purpose development, which I do a lot of work with. What is my individual purpose as a coach? How do I help my athletes understand what their individual purpose is? How do I support? And I think a lot of times old school coaching was, and especially was sort of like very commanding, authoritative, do this, do that. And that works for some athletes. Some athletes need a very hard line, but not all. And the book is really designed to help coaches foster both an understanding of themselves. What's the best way that I approach coaching? What feels the most comfortable for me? What are the areas that don't feel comfortable for me? How do I support that? Because ultimately you need to be able to access and, get the most out of all of your athletes. And it doesn't mean that's not a one-stop shop of one size fits all. You really do need to understand the athletes on a deeper level, how to do that, and help to support them both from an individual standpoint. How do I help individuals develop, but also how do I help the team? And those are sort of opposites of like, okay, you can't, we talk about polarity management of how do we manage developing a team, but also the individual. So it's not one or the other, it's both. And the book is really designed to help coaches specifically, or CEOs or leadership teams, really anybody who's in charge of working with people and managing other people. It's really sort of like a training manual for best practices and best approaches for doing that.
That is so cool. That is amazing. I know it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
A ton.
It's like incredible. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. Like, and you like it's like your little baby that you put out into the world. And I'm so glad that you were able to do it and work. And, this is your passion. And I'm really glad you were able to put it out there and be supportive to the people who need it.
Yeah.
And I just want to give a shout out for your podcast, which I also actually started listening to, Grim Drive, which is all about that, mental health in athletes, which I think is really cool. And I listened to one about youth sports and that sort of piece of like, why are kids dropping out of youth sports so young? And then how, like the benefits and the pros and cons of it,
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I think that the messaging from the Olympics can be really powerful, that this type of work, it's never too soon to start. And you don't have to wait. I think youth sports and sports in general the last decade have really shifted. It's much more business oriented. It's much more, especially in high school, it's seen as like a gateway to college, not as a gateway to escape, fun, joy, pleasure, developing like actual skills that you're going to need in real life. It's much more about, even if it's team sports, it's much more about like, what can this sport provide for me, in a way of getting me to the best college necessary. And I think that process is starting earlier and earlier. So not only do I have to get on this youth team, it needs to be the best youth team. I need to be the best player on that team. And that's why your injuries are going up. The injury numbers over the last 5 years have skyrocketed, because you are a single sport athlete, as opposed to before you'd play different sports in different seasons. You'd train different muscles. You'd rest the muscles that you were overutilizing during the season. That's gone away. You're like a basketball player and you play basketball all year. You're a hockey player, you play hockey all year. And if you ask some of the top athletes, LeBron, Tom Brady, again, same list, they will all tell you the importance of playing multiple sports to train all parts of the body and so that you don't get injured. And I think the one thing, and I spoke about this on NPR the other day, is the one thing that I think has been completely removed and gutted from the youth sports is joy.
Yes.
Kids aren't having fun anymore. Yeah. And why do something if it doesn't bring you, fun or enjoyment? And when we think about, and this, to bring back about Simone, she talked about this too. Like, she wasn't having fun. And I know she got a huge amount of backlash for that, of like, which we probably don't have time to go on my pedestal about that. But to sum up, really, then why would you be doing it? When we talk about athletes and we talk about flow state or in the zone or whatever term you like to call it, joy is the key to that state. And because it helps you stay like focused on the present moment. If you're worried, nervous, anxious, doubtful, any of those different things, your performance is going to suffer from that. And joy is really one of the best things that you can do for yourself in terms of being in that type of a mentality. Now, you can invite other thoughts, other ideas into that, but joy and really needs to be a core component of that. And that's being completely uprooted and gutted from youth sports. And which is, to your point, where dropout rates are skyrocketing, injuries are skyrocketing. And I'm been screaming from the rooftops for years about like backing off. You could be competitive and have fun. You can teach kids, especially, what appropriate and healthy competitiveness looks like. It's not cutthroat. It's not me versus you. It's I am doing this because it feels good for myself, and I am competitive, driving my own ship, not at the expense of others. And that's a message that's been lost. And I'm hopeful that more messages and more brave souls like Simone can speak up about stuff like this, because it helps steer the narrative back where it needs to be and really starts to fix some of the problems. And that's, again, I think that's joy, and it's just not as present as it needs to be.
Yep, exactly. And I think there, for us in our family, I have noticed as my kids get older, it's gotten more and more competitive. And I'll be honest, my kids are not sporty kids. They are just not. We do arts and crafts, we go on walks, we watch anime. Like, that's the kind of speed we are as a family.
Yeah.
So,
that's awesome.
When we get to the place where they're like, it's like competitive, like team, whatever. And my kids are like, so what do you want me to, I'm actually not sure. And so like, if they don't like it, I just say, you don't have to do it. Like, if it feels like it's getting too intense for you, like you feel like the coaches are yelling at you, you feel like it's all about the winning, you feel like it's all about like who's the best player on the team, you don't have to, because it's supposed to be fun. If you're not having fun, please don't do it. Like, I'm not going to
I
drive
agree.
like all over creation
Right.
to like be miserable
Yeah.
every time we go. No, it's not happening. So,
Yep. Right. One of the first questions I ask for athletes who are coming in and talking to me is, when we go through like a developing purpose, there's like a whole process. But one of the questions that I always ask is like, why did you start to play? And I would say 99% of the time that I get back is like, oh, I loved it.
yeah.
And then I ask like, when did you lose that? And then it's oh, and it's almost like this shock value of like, I hadn't even realized I wasn't having fun anymore. It's like, how do we get back there? Right? How do we get back to you going and being excited about going and doing the thing that probably you feel the best version of yourself while you're doing it? How do we get back there? Because if you don't know what that feels like, it's going to be really hard to translate that to real life. And that's something that athletes really struggle with, is sort of identity. I'm an athlete, but I'm also a person. And oftentimes they tie it too much to like, I'm only as good as my performance.
Yeah.
But if you can help them understand those core principles, you can really do some good.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's amazing. And so the last thing I always ask my guests is, how do you rest and recharge? What's something that fills your cup?
Oh, man. Lots of things. I require a lot of recharging because the work that we do is so draining. One of the things that I do, exercise is key for me. So walking my dog is a big one. I go for a walk in the woods with them. I don't bring my phone. I don't bring anything. I just sort of like observe. I have a whole system for that. I do a lot of breath training. That's a huge component of what I do. Like I train my breath to control my breath, because then I can notice if it's out of whack and I need to do something for myself. And I do a lot of like affirmations and gratitude work. So waking up and just sort of like identifying things that I appreciate about myself. We're 4 times more likely to be critical in a negative way. And I want to work to balance some of that stuff. And then throughout the day, I do doorway affirmations. So I walk through a doorway and I just, to myself in my head, not out loud, I'd probably get some odd looks if I did that. But I just sort of in my head, just sort of remind myself of like, you're a good listener, you're a good father, you're, and I kind of just go through different things that I go for, or I recite a quote inside my head. And then gratitude work, I try to just remind myself who helped me get to where I'm at, who continues to support me while I'm doing all this stuff. My wife, my family, my friends, colleagues, people I respect, all those different things. Those are sort of like the core ones. I really try to separate and distance myself from my phone as much as possible. So I have a very firm, like 8:00. Nope, not engaging in that, so I can be present with myself, my spouse, my kids, whatever it happens to be. Those are some of the big ones that I do. I'd say exercise and breath training are probably my 2 main ones. Breath training is kind of like mindfulness, meditation, breath training, yoga. That's kind of like all encapsulated in that. Those are sort of like, if I don't do those for a few days, my wife will lovingly remind me that the cranky pants, as she likes to refer to it, is coming out, and maybe that I could take some time and do that too. So I'm a pretty extroverted person, but my battery gets drained pretty quickly, and I need like that solitude moment. Like I need nothing coming at me for a while. So those are some of the big ones that I try to do to recharge.
Oh my gosh, those are awesome. I have not thought about doorway affirmations. That is brilliant, because you're always going
Try
through.
it.
Yeah, you're always
Always.
going through.
Always.
Like constantly. Like even if you're home, you're going through them all the time.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, it's brilliant. I love it. Well, Jon, thank you so much for coming on the Calm and Connected podcast. I'm so pleased.
Absolutely.
And I'm so excited for you and all the things that you're doing and all the good work that you're putting out there. And so I'm really glad that you were able to come on here. And I always like to end the podcast with, let's make sure that we are all taking care of ourselves, having a little fun, and having awesome days.
Absolutely. Thanks, Janine.